Hello and welcome to episode 152 of Random Encounter, the RPG fan podcast. I'm your host, Derek Heemsbergen. I'm Embryonics on Twitter. That's at EMBRYONX. And today I am joined by some of my usual faves. I've got Caitlin Argyros.
Hi there, guys. Leon Kazarel on Twitter and on Discord.
Yes, and we've also got the the actor type guy, Greg Delmage.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Delmage on Twitter and GDelme on Discord. And hi, happy to be here.
I don't know why I gave you a Delmage, like Amelie du Delmage kind of thing.
It happens a lot. Someone just asked me that recently in an audition that my name was Delmage. And I'm like, no, it's German. It's Delmage.
Delmage. And also, you are a certified mocap actor now for video games, aren't you?
I sure am. FIFA 2019, which some of our audience might play, just came out on this past Friday as of this recording. And I'm in it playing chiefly Kevin De Bruyne, who's he's Manchester United. I forget who plays.
Is he a soccer DPS or a soccer player?
He's according actually one of our close friends asked if I also take cheap shots like he does, so I guess he's good at scoring cheap shots. That's my understanding.
There's some sentiment laced into that statement.
Apparently, I don't know, I'm not a big on the footballs, but he seems like a nice dude, as I had to study him to understand his voice and all that stuff. He seems really cool. That's about all I got.
Wonderful.
But yeah, play it if you like. I'm in the story mode.
You can play Greg in a real life video game now. And when you're not playing FIFA 19 and whiling the hours away on the football field, as it were, you can also listen to the dulcet tones of Robert Fenner.
Hey, it's me. Random Encounter's cutest little lush. This is a cry for help, please.
Agreed.
That is so you. I forgot to call you by your full given name, which is Robert Bibby Bennett Fenner, right?
That is correct. Thank you for nailing the pronunciation. I know that it's a little bit difficult when you read it, but you did that spot on.
Yeah, what is that? English?
Yeah.
I always thought it was Babby Bennett.
Oh, Babby Bennett.
No. Just don't ever say that to me again.
Well, I'm glad that you cracked a cold one open. I was just thinking right before I started this recording that I should have grabbed a beer beforehand, but I'm also out of beer at the house, so we're going to have a very sad episode of Random Encounter. This isn't true, actually.
What's your beer, Derek? What is your beer of choice?
I like a couple different types. I like my stouts. I like chocolatey or espresso-y beers.
Hell yeah.
I also really like a wheat beer sometimes, like a crisp kind of ale that I can just kick back with and record a podcast to and not get too effed up.
Started like you're just going to describe your typical male, but
okay, well,
then
that's
you
fair.
mentioned beer, then I got
Stout is also applicable.
Start dark and handsome.
Absolutely, yes, all those words.
Caitlin, what do you drink?
I don't really drink alcohol, but when I do, I like hard cider. So,
we usually have that on hand.
I'm there with you.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, that makes me feel less awkward.
Yeah, I don't do it often, but it's either wine or cider.
Yeah, cider's a nice chill, double meaning.
I was out at this
girls and boys.
I was out at this sort of hole in the wall cider bar in my neighborhood last night with some friends that were doing these flavored ciders. There was like a lemon meringue cider and a blood orange cider and a cherry bakewell tart cider, and they were all about 6%, and none of them tasted like alcohol at all. And it was like, well, we'd better just have two because this
very dangerous.
I want all of those.
Yeah.
So everybody, welcome to Brewing Encounter.
This is along the lines of that episode you had pitched a while back. Close.
It's actually accurate. We'll get there. So what are we doing today, Derek?
Well, as much as I'd like to just talk booze to the apparent discomfort of a couple of the people on the show, let's talk some video games, shall we? There is one in particular that I have been putting a lot of time into recently. I guess there are several, but one that I just absolutely marathon. Like, I dove into this game and I came up for air 2 days later after getting all but one trophy, so that I was like that close to getting the platinum, and I was like, Derek, you need to chill out. You have a life to live. If only I had my own time traveling device and I could go back in time in Timespinner, or like in Timespinner. That was my attempt at an introduction. So Timespinner is a newly released, like, another quote-unquote Metroidvania style game. I know that description becomes very tiresome, but it's pretty apt for this type of game because it's so very inspired by Castlevania Symphony of the Night in terms of like probably both aesthetics to a degree because it's fairly gothic. It's like gothic sci-fi, I would call it. Very inspired by Symphony of the Night and Super Metroid in terms of its like structure. It is a side-scrolling 2D pixelated action game with RPG elements, and it has been in production apparently for 9 years. If you don't even count the time that the creator spent sort of daydreaming up all of the scenario and the lore information when he was in grade school. So Timespinner is newly published by Chucklefish, who did Stardew Valley, and as they're a publisher, they didn't like create the game, but they published it. So they have a pretty, I think they have generally like good taste in selecting game, like their curation of what games they decide to publish. So it's developed by Lunar Ray Games, which is headed by basically this one developer, Bodhi Lee, and he brought in Jeff Ball to do the soundtrack. Jeff Ball is a composer. He did the soundtrack for Tiny Barbarian Deluxe, and he's also the violinist for Steven Universe. So he's got some interesting pedigree, and so he came in and made the soundtrack, which is phenomenal, and I will probably talk more about that later. But yeah, so Timespinner, it's like the latest in a series of pretty high quality Metroidvania style games to release this year, and unlike many of its contemporaries, I think that it's one of the absolute best and executes pretty much everything Chasm tried to do and failed. Have any of the rest of you played Timespinner yet?
I have poured most of my day into Timespinner. I picked it up on Friday, and I mean, watching its trailer and looking at its art and hearing the buzz about it, it's like, well, this looks like it's probably going to be a decent Symphony of the Night like, but with some with a few hooks here and there, specifically its time freezing mechanic. And boy, that's it's what I expected, and it's what I got, and I'm really, really happy with it. I gotta say, I'm a little surprised at how heavy it gets. It can be a little bit heavy-handed, but it's really got that oppressive tone.
Mm-hmm. And also, yeah, heavy in terms of like it immediately jumps from, yay, it's somebody's birthday and we're celebrating, into, oh, the corrupt imperialist like regime is coming to wipe all of you out and your mom's dead.
Oh, good.
Yeah, or at least implied to be very quickly.
They've got a take on the 14 words in there. The famous white nationalist slogan where they've subbed out white children with magical children. And I was like, oh boy, wow, okay, you've just gone there.
Yeah. That's one critique that I have of Timespinner. Overall, I think it's an amazingly well-crafted game, but the dialogue is incredibly direct.
Yeah.
And not always the most elegant in terms of communicating what it wants to communicate. Like the themes, I think, are great and worth exploring, and I think that they still touch upon, like, I was going to get to this later, but I think Timespinner has like the most queer characters I've seen in one game ever. Other than like an explicitly queer game. Like, I don't know. I was going to say Dream Daddy, but that's another conversation because I don't think that Dream Daddy is queer at all. I think Dream Daddy is a game where you play as a gay person, but it's made for straight people. Anyway, not to like disparage, because Dream Daddy still is a fine game. It's just not targeted to people like me, I suppose, and that's all right. So Timespinner, has pretty much every member of its cast is in some way queer, and a lot of it isn't really touched upon in the main dialogue that propels the story forward, like the story of this main character, Lunace. She's a time messenger, and she is part of like this clan who protects this magical artifact that can allow somebody to travel through time. And she's tasked with using that to basically forestall ruin, or to warn her clan about this empire encroaching. And then, of course, things get taken a little bit too far, and she has to end up like solving those issues and traveling back in time and trying to find a way from stopping her clan from being annihilated. But pretty much every character you encounter over the course of the story, and there's not that many, there's probably like 8 to 10 characters in the game. They're all like in some way queer. And I know that queer is a charged word for a lot of folks. I'm using it in a pretty like academic context here, just saying that like they're either gay, lesbian, bisexual, or there's a transgender character. And I find that a lot of the characterization is like, it means something to somebody like me because it's interesting to see so many of those folks represented in this game. However, to get all the way back to Robert's point, a lot of that feels very like, kind of, it does feel heavy-handed to me, or like overly direct or straightforward with the way that they introduce those elements of characterization. Like, there's a conversation where this is, I guess, a minor spoiler for the game, but I just said that there was a transgender character, and this is also something that's optional and in a side quest, but there's a character who's like talking to the main character Lunace and saying, oh, and there's something that I've been hiding about myself. I just wanted to tell you that I was born a man, but I have always known in my heart that I'm a woman. And Lunace says, thank you so much for trusting me with that. I really appreciate you telling me. And it's like, okay. It's like the textbook conversation, right? Of like when people say, how do I be supportive if somebody comes up to me as transgender or whatever? Like that, they just took that word for word, basically, and made that.
Yeah, without like having a dialogue is like what actual people would say.
Right.
It's hard for me to be too mad at it because it's coming from a very sweet place.
Yes.
But yeah, it is kind of, it's pretty goofy when you spell it out like that.
And there's a point where a guy says to like, oh, you know, you obviously have a crush on so-and-so, and your character says, don't make assumptions. I'm interested in both men and women. And they say, oh, I'm sorry for assuming that about you. It's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like Robert says, it comes from a good place, but I think a lot of it is just like so stripped down. Like, there's not really a conversation happening. It's just there. That being said, I still appreciate the inclusion because it is so rare to see all of that present in a game in general. And especially, like, I didn't expect any of it whatsoever in this game. So it came as a welcome surprise to me. And I will emphasize that not that I think that any of this is shameful or bad, or I think it's wonderful, but it is pretty much all optional. So you can play through the game without like experiencing it. And I know I've seen a lot of backlash actually on Steam community and stuff.
Well, you see, it doesn't matter if it's optional. It needs to be removed and stamped out, right?
According to a lot
as
of
gamers, we must we must not, and we must not have something that we will not enjoy.
Yeah, but anyway, I think I've belabored this point enough. What was your take going to be about that line in the game? Just that it was direct, like I was saying, or
it was direct. At the same time, I was like, okay, right, yeah, we're going for fascism as the enemy here. That's fine. I can get behind that. I was a little surprised that they like took the 14 words almost verbatim and just subbed out one adjective. But I don't know. Maybe it's the kind of climate where we need that kind of thing. I mean, I think there's a better way, or a slightly more like, I don't think it goes too far. I just think it's a little bit clunky. But like for every like weird bit of text or howler of a line, there's some really well articulated ideas present in Timespinner's narrative. I'm thinking particularly about like you as you go through the game, you find like your character's mother's diary, who's like talking about how she grew up trained to be a time spinner, and she's like watching the rest of her clan who are time spinners going through the motions, and there seems to be like traversing world lines and going back and forth between parallel dimensions as well as time travel. So I mean, there was one entry that really stuck with me where the clan's current time spinner like comes back in time, and her husband runs to greet her, but she's got a different husband and a different family because she's come from a different world line, and they both have to deal with that.
Right. I think it was the other way around. The man was the time messenger, and then he
my mistake.
And because this is like, I remember this just because she has like 2 wives already. And then he goes to embrace her and she's like, oh, were we together in your world or your timeline? So they have to reconcile that. And then that's something of a plot point that it's not like a major plot point. It's not really in the main story at all. But if you dive into the data logs, you find out that there's a little bit more to that. And like what happens when they sort of try to reconcile the fact that they were once together in a different timeline.
Okay.
So I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So I was, yeah, that touched me in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like I guess we should talk about the time freezing mechanic because that's the big thing that Timespinner does differently. And yeah,
And I
it's
don't
used
really think it's a big thing.
No, it's really not. It's really used sparingly, where you can freeze time for a certain amount of time, and you'll occasionally, use that to freeze an enemy in the sky, and then use them as a platform to get someplace higher. And yeah, it is so spare. You almost never have to do this.
Right, and you can also use it as a strategic option in battles, like if you're fighting a boss and you want to stop time and hop behind them to avoid an attack or whatever.
Yeah.
I forgot I could. I didn't use it.
Constantly forgetting.
Yeah, throughout most of the game, I just never used it because it doesn't really feel essential. It feels like an additional, like it feels like an option, but never like a necessity to get through anything except for moments where you're using it in platforming. And even then I can think of like 5 times in the entire game where you have to use it to get up to someplace.
And eventually, like in a lot of those cases, you end up with a double jump eventually, so you just don't have to use it again when you backtrack. So I think a lot of people may feel that that's too spare, and it's definitely stuck out at me as just not having a presence. However, like I think about that, and then I also think about its inverse. In particular, Guacamelee, which made heavy use of this like parallel dimension shifting mechanic to do some very, very difficult platforming very, very early on, and completely scared me away from that game, and has scared me away from its sequel as well, because it's just asking for like precise, dexterous moves with this sort of clunky system that I don't feel like I can pull off, and I didn't have fun pulling off. So I think I'd rather have something that like Timespinner that like has this unique mechanic and is, uses it in moderation rather than, I don't know. I guess they're different games for different audiences, but I think, with Guacamelee, I really wanted to experience that game for its wacky writing and its fun art style, and I just couldn't cope with it after like the first boss
Interesting.
battle.
Well, there's something to be said for them trying to set themselves apart, I suppose. And certain games will have their gimmick and be like, you play it with the gimmick, and that's the whole thing to set it apart from other parts of the genre. Whereas, yeah, it's kind of interesting when you have a game like Timespinner, like, well, we have a gimmick, but you don't necessarily need to use it if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. And it certainly will make the game more accessible, I think, for less skilled players. If somebody's struggling with a boss, you can very easily just like make use of that mechanic to position yourself strategically. But I just don't feel like I can't think of any boss actually that requires the time stopping mechanic to beat it. Like you can always learn the pattern and dodge or whatever. It's not like you have to stop time and like run to the other side of the room or 100% get hit, if that makes sense.
There's a trophy for not stopping time and not getting hit during a boss battle. So it's obviously like not ever essential.
Yeah. But I think what one of the other things that really impresses me about Timespinner, aside from just like that gimmick is a gimmick, but it isn't something that's so heavily relied upon that you have to do it to get through the game. I'm just mostly impressed by the incredible like aesthetic and how well it feels to play. It's so close to Symphony of the Night in terms of tactile feel, like character control. You've got a backdash, which I did not realize until very far into the game. I never really used it.
I always forgot that I had that too.
Yeah, unlike Chasm, it's not as clunky. It works a lot better. Lunace, the main character, she's a very swift character, very nimble. Her jump doesn't feel overly floaty. It feels very well controlled. Eventually, you get a double jump, and her main method of attack is via orbs. So in this game, instead of having like weapons that are dropped off of enemies, there are a finite number of special orbs. And you start with the blue orb, which is just basically like she flings it like a psychic orb. And orbs have kind of three, what do I want to call them, like 3 sides to them, which is probably not appropriate because an orb is a sphere. Orbs are like tri-pronged. I don't know what you want me to call this. You
got a standard attack, a special attack, and a passive ability.
Thank you. So an orb you can equip 2 orbs. She's got like a main and a sub orb, and whenever you hit the square button or whatever your default attack button is, she kind of flings it forward, and she does them in rapid succession. So if you're pressing the attack button, she's just going orb 1 2 1 2 1 2, and it's a very fast attack animation, and I found it very pleasing, like right off the bat to use. So in addition to having sort of your ability to use that as a weapon, you can also use that same orb to cast like a spell where you hold your magic button to charge it and let go. So for the blue orb, she does an aura blast. That's like a Hadoken type thing. And then you can also use a passive, which sort of enchants your orbs or your character in some way passively. So I think, does the blue orb give you the sides, or is that something else?
That's the green orb. The blue orb gives you a damage boost, but you also take more damage.
Oh, okay. All right. So as Fenner just said, the second orb you get, the green orb, is for it's the blade orb. So when you attack, she'll kind of throw out a sword, similar to maybe like a sword animation in Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Your spell is like a gigantic blade that's as big as the screen. And
So
then the
cool.
passive, it is super cool. The passive makes your little orbs that float around your character have like buzzsaws on them. And if an enemy touches them, they'll take a little extra damage. Or like if you're throwing the orbs out, let's say I use the blue orb, but I enchant it with the green orb for the passive. Every time I throw out that blue psychic orb attack, the blades will do a little bit extra. So I think there's something like 10 orbs, maybe between 10 and 12. I can't remember. In the game. So each one has those variants, like the regular attack animation, the spell, and the passive. And so you can come up with really interesting combinations to utilize the orbs to whatever playstyle you want to enjoy. Like there are some very fast ones, there are some very slow ones. And you can have 3 loadouts that you can switch between at the touch of a button. So you can like swap in the middle of battle very quickly if you want to. My favorite was I found like there's a moon orb that's basically just like the first one you get, but it's a little bit longer range, a little bit slower. And I enchanted that with a passive that made them shoot icicles every single time I hit with one. So I just had this like super fast going icicle barrage in conjunction with a close-up melee strike. And I like using fast hitting ones. Oh, that's what I used. I didn't use the moon one. I used it for a bit. I ended up using a wind one, which kind of deploys a rapier. So it was like super fast rapiers with icicles flying out of them. And then all the while I could utilize like the giant sword spell or whatever. So
I haven't found that yet. I'm excited.
yeah, it's a really good one. And you can use a different orb in your sub slot from your main slot. So you could have a combination. I could have blue psychic orb in my left hand and blade in my right hand, and you just kind of deploy them alternately if you want to. So I think this strikes a good balance of being like you have a lot of attack options, like a lot of weapons that feel very different in terms of weight and speed, while also allowing you to level them up. And it's not like they're super disposable. Like you might find 5 different short swords, and each one has a different stat of like 1 or 2 attack or whatever. In this game, the orbs level up the more you use them. So you can choose a loadout or 3 loadouts that you enjoy and strengthen that as you go through the game. And it really lets you make the most of whatever your playstyle is. So do you have a favorite orb combination or anything that you're really enjoying about the combat, Fenner?
I like the fire passive ability that makes your orbs burn, and then that can inflict like a constant burning damage effect when it hits a foe. At the moment, like I'm still getting a lot of mileage out of like the double hammers, the iron orb, because that's like the sword orb, but like a little bit slower and harder hitting. I recently got the plasma orb that shoots out arced lightning as well. So I'm kind of working on building that up because it's almost got like a little bit of a homing ability to it. And I'm just able to, that also depletes your magic gauge. But that's pretty satisfying to fire off.
And you can even do like a passive from one of the orbs that makes the aura depletion less significant, or I think one like recharges it passively, so you can kind of make up for that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I'm just sort of experimenting at the moment and trying to make sure all my orbs, or all the orbs that I like using, which are at the moment the iron orb, the plasma orb, and I think I'm still using that sword orb because I like the way it looks a lot. So I'm sort of rotating them in and out to make sure they're all of a sort of equal tier.
Yeah, I did that a bunch too, and I found that there were even some types that didn't seem as useful up like initially, and then once I figured out a use for them, I was like, oh, there's a blood orb that's kind of gnarly. It just sort of it's like blood bending from Avatar. It basically just like makes this little congealed splatter of blood appear in the air and then drain into you.
Oh, I'm
So
here for that.
yeah, so if you first of all, it does bonus damage I've noticed to humanoid enemies. And second of all, because it starts like some distance away from you and then tracks inward to you, you can use it to trap enemies. Like there are knights that have shields, and so the damage hits them kind of at the back of their hitbox and actually does damage to them and then does more as it comes forward. So it really behooves you to actually experiment with different weapon types, because there might be an enemy type that you may be like, oh, this is kind of annoying. But once you find a way to deal with them effectively, you're like, okay, this is no problem at all. I think if there's a main complaint I have about Timespinner, beyond some of the writing being a little bit too heavy-handed, it's that I wanted more of it. It's very lean and almost, I would say, like almost too lean. I really like focused experiences. Like I go back to it time and time again, but one of my favorite games is East the Oath and Felghana. Like that's my example of a game that is so like perfectly paced. Good. I'm glad you agree. Just because it doesn't really feel like there's any wasted segment of that game. Like every dungeon is just long enough and the plot moves at a fast enough pace, and I never feel bored or like feeling like it's all filler. And Timespinner does the same thing. But maybe I'm just being selfish or greedy, but I liked it so much that by the time I finished with it, I just wanted more, you know?
Well, that's the sign of a really good game that leaves you wanting more rather than leaving you just, exhausted and spent.
Yeah. And there are many games that I've gotten tired of in the 11th hour and just pushed through because I needed to or wanted to see it finished. And Timespinner was not one such game. I immediately started it a second time. I beat it a second time and got the true ending, and then I started a new run on the nightmare difficulty right after that. So,
oh wow, that really has had an effect.
Yeah, it's rare that I get so hooked on a game that I immediately want to start it again. I'm just like ready to shelve it by the time I see credits roll. So, yeah, I think Timespinner is a really excellent addition to the sort of resurgence of Metroidvanias we've seen recently. I think that it does something very differently from, say, Hollow Knight. It's funny because they're both like kind of the same game in terms of like their core. They have the same structure, but they feel very different to me. And I do think that. Yeah, I think Timespinner is it's a lot leaner than Hollow Knight, and that's neither a good or a bad thing. It just is. It's kind of like a smaller game, but I highly recommend it. If you've seen it in motion, why haven't you bought it yet? If you haven't seen it in motion, go look it up. Just Google it. There's like a PlayStation blog post, which is where I found out about this just a couple weeks ago, that has some beautiful GIFs of the game in action, and you can really get a sense for how it's going to look and feel when you play it. Timespinner, highly recommended. On the way more, what am I trying to say here? On the not single player front, Jesus, I need that beer or something, or a coffee, or both. Irish coffee. On the not single player front, we have got the long running Final Fantasy XIV, and Caitlin and I are both still playing it very much. Patch 4.4 released just a few weeks ago. For those who are really unaware of the structure, Final Fantasy XIV, for every sort of expansion, there seems to be this cycle of about 5 big updates to the game. And we're on the 4th major update to the Stormblood expansion. So we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up, it seems. We expect there to be a new expansion announced at the Fan Festival in Las Vegas this November. But until then, there is still stuff to do in Final Fantasy patch 4.4. So, Caitlin, I know that you just streamed it today for RPG Fan, did you not?
I did. I went through all of the new instanced content for the game. So we had 2 new dungeons added. One of them is a story dungeon called The Burn, which has beautiful music and is fun.
Oh, so good.
Another is Saint Mosian's Arboretum Hard, which is basically a harder version of a Heavensward dungeon, which is doesn't have as good music, and it's still fun. Final boss can be kind of the final bosses in both dungeons actually can be challenging a little bit, depending on how you handle mechanics. So it's always kind of nice to see them kind of up the ante a little bit in dungeons.
Yeah, they've gotten kind of safe recently.
Yeah. It also, of course, added the latest and the last raid tier for Stormblood's raid content. This is, of course, the Omega raid. it's called Alphascape, and it is very good. 4 really fun, awesome fights, even on normal mode, and the story wraps up really, really nicely. I was really happy with how everything ended up, and there's some cuteness in there too. So
cute, Alpha.
Yeah. Alpha, I love Alpha so much. And then, of course, we have a new Primal. This Primal is part of the Four Lords story. It's Suzaku, so it's another one of the. You've seen them; they get used all the time in various different games. So you have we had Byakko before. We fought Genbu in a story dungeon or a side dungeon, and now we're fighting Suzaku. And they're fun fights, lots of great music across all of the content, really. Some of my favorite dungeon and raid music that Soken has produced, and it's amazing that this man has this kind of output.
I know. I worry for his health.
I know.
Speaking of, right?
Well, he said that it's a lot. I don't know how he does it. And it's why, as much as I would love him to do, a mainline Final Fantasy, I don't want him to do anything until 14 is done, because I can't imagine him taking on multiple projects with the kind of the prolific music that he has to put out there.
Yeah, and I think this patch in particular had a larger influx of new music than probably the last few, because in the Stormblood patch series, we've had these alliance raids based on the Ivalice universe. And so we've had Ravenaster from Final Fantasy XII was one of them, and then now we had basically Ridorano Lighthouse also from Final Fantasy XII. But they've been taking music from 12 and tactics and pretty much just presenting it unarranged. It's just the original songs. So while those patches have had those new tracks added to the game, this one in particular is almost all new compositions, with the exception of the aforementioned, we said Alpha. Alpha is the Chocobo's dungeon Chocobo that they added to this game, and he's part of that Omega storyline, and you get the ending theme from Chocobo's dungeon as one of the tracks, and it's so cute. But yeah, I think that I think there was more new music in this one, definitely than the last patch, possibly even more than the one before that. I'm not sure, but yeah, he's really been he's been killing it, and they're great this patch. Everything in it's super good.
Yeah, well, part of it is that every fight in Alphascape has different music, and only one fight has reused music. I think 10 is definitely reused. Everything else is new. And then, of course, the Savage mode of 12 has 2 different themes. So
it does?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
It has, that really super epic music that played in the trailer for 4.4.
Oh, okay.
That's the second half of Savage 12. Is that?
Gotcha. Well, they've really upped the ante on each of the Savage final raids for this entire expansion. The first one we had X Death, and then there was in the Savage difficulty there was Neo X Death, and then that had its own music, and then we had Kefka, excuse me, and then whatever One Winged Angel Kefka or Winged Kefka, God Kefka. There we go.
God Kefka.
Yeah, and they have the 4 movements of Dancing Mad, which is insane. And then, I guess it makes sense that they would follow in the pattern, right? But I didn't realize that there was another song. Need to check that out.
It's super epic. Wow.
Yeah, I would say these fights, I don't know how they managed to keep making them more and more. I mean, the word epic is really what comes to mind, and I'm so loath to use that word so often, but my God, the final fight of the Heavensward raid series for Alexander, I thought was the pinnacle of 8-man raid, basically, in terms of how amazingly cool it could get, because you fought the giant Alexander, the castle basically himself, and there's a part where it stops time and the music stops and stuff, and I just was oh my God, it can't get any cooler than this. And then we got all these cool fights in Stormblood leading up to what we finally got here, which is the confrontation with Omega. It's been obviously foreshadowed the whole time because the whole raid series is based around him, but you have this super cool fight against Omega in his robot form, and it has great music, a callback to, what is it, Locus? What's the name of the Cruise Chaser music?
Gosh, I'm really bad. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but it's kind of like got a similar sound to it with the distorted computerized kind of vocals. Very, very fun fight. And then the final one against Omega. I guess this is like kind of spoilers, but against a humanoid Omega in the final one, and it's like you're fighting it in freaking space, and like there are giant lasers everywhere, and it's so cool. Like I don't know how else to explain it other than I just feel like it's amazingly cool. And when I did it, I was like, this is awesome. Like edge of your seat kind of fun stuff. So.
Yeah, and it's challenging. I mean, the normal fights are quite comparatively, compared to the normal version fights in Deltascape and Sigmascape, I think they upped the challenge there. And what I've experienced of Savage has been the first turn this time is got a lot to do, and it's a pretty hard DPS check for the first fight in the tier. So they are definitely kind of upping the ante a little bit that way.
Mm-hmm. Which is good, because I guess it gives everybody something to do while we wait for more content, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah,
I would say overall it's a really good patch. And you went through all of the new instant stuff on the stream today?
minus the Savage raids, because that's a lot to, yeah.
All right, well, excellent. So absolutely, if you're listening to this episode and you want to get a look at some of these fights, please go check out the stream archives over on our Twitch channel. What is that? Twitch.tv/ is it RPG Fancom?
Should be, yes.
That sounds right, yeah.
Okay, cool.
With the upcoming festival, what they always usually release a class 2 with each new major expansion, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have any hopes to see in there?
So there's been a lot of speculation, and apparently, like according to some people, there have been some leaks, but A, I haven't looked into it, and B, I don't know how much we can trust those.
Yeah, why spoil yourself? We'll hear about it when we hear about it. But.
Yeah, but there's the pattern has been, if they're going to follow the same pattern, is that in November they'll probably unveil the expansion, like give us a name and show us some kind of a CG teaser, but that's it. And then they do subsequent fan festivals in Japan and Europe. And last cycle, they announced a job at one and then a job at the other. Is that right, Caitlin?
I believe so, yes.
Which was Samurai and
Red Mage.
Right.
So most of the rumors that are swirling is that we're going to get Blue Mage in the new expansion. I'm not sure how that would work, but I loved Blue Mage in Final Fantasy XI, so I think it would be super cool. I just don't know, a big part of Blue Magic is learning from enemies, right? So
yeah. How did they make it work in 11?
You actually had to go out and get hit by the abilities by enemies, and you'd have a pretty low chance of learning the spell. It was actually very, very difficult in Final Fantasy XI to collect all the Blue Magic. But then once you did, each spell had kind of a set cost, and you had a special Blue Magic interface of setting each spell to your character, and then you could only you could only change it in towns in 11, and then once you were out in the field, you just had access to whatever that was. So people would optimize and come up with the best spells for whatever content, that'll always be a thing. But yeah, I wonder if they introduce it in 14, if they would go the way of having its own special interface and a special learning method and stuff. I guess it's possible, right?
Well, the job quest system is set up, I think, nicely for that. I think the question would be since the job's going to start, presumably would start at 50, the way that Red Mage and Samurai started at 50. Mm-hmm. How would you explain all the skills you have up to 50? But I mean, you can totally see how they would use job quests to say, on this job quest, you have to go and fight this monster to learn this skill because it's important and whatnot. And the quest is about you obtaining that spell, because a lot of times that's what happens. You do a job quest, you get a spell, although Stormblood changed that too, in that you now obtain only some of your spells from job quests and the rest you just get from leveling. So it depends on how they want to do it. I've also heard rumors about Dancer maybe joining the fray, and they recently did an interview with Yoshi P. I think it was on DualShockers, and when they asked him about what he just theoretically would like to play or to see, he threw out arithmetician or calculator from Tactics.
Oh, which
which
would
could,
go really well with the Garlean stuff.
I think it'd be really cool, and you could see it being. I would see it being a caster no matter what, but it could be either a offensive DPS or a healer character, depending on what they want to do, or it could be kind of like Red Mage and can do a little bit of both or something like that.
That's such a wild class. I'd love to see their take on that.
Yeah. And if you do it like Tactics, it's whatever. If you learn stuff from each of those jobs, I wonder if that would play into, we see you have levels in this, so then you get spells from them as well. So you could be conceivably a Red Mage calculator.
It'd be interesting. I think they'd have to do some pretty significant balancing on that if that were to be a thing, because otherwise, some people you would have to level all the jobs to be optimized for whatever content kind of thing. But
true.
I'm hoping that the new expansion for 14 has some more shakeups than Stormblade did. I still think Stormblade has been a phenomenal expansion. I just think they need to do something a bit different than just okay, here's 2 new classes. Here's the new series. You got 5 dungeons from levels 70 to 80. I just think something should change. I don't know if they'll ever abolish the job crystal system or the class restrictions, the role system where you have DPS, healer, and tank as the 3 roles. I would like to see some more hybridization, but I don't know how that would affect the balance of literally everything that has come out up to this point. So,
what do you want, Derek? Do you want them to blow up the world again?
I mean,
they're kind of building to that.
They're kind of building to that, actually.
We don't want to spoil main story, but the main story quests put in motion lots of different little breadcrumbs that probably are going to get pulled into 5.0. I don't see all of this getting resolved in 1 or 2 patches, so it's probably set up for the next expansion. There's some pretty interesting stuff, though. I'm looking forward to seeing where this all goes.
Yeah, I think hopefully this is vague enough to not be really considered a spoiler. I'm not going into specifics of what happens in this patch necessarily, but what they seem to be building towards is this idea that light and dark need to be balanced, and that everything you and your compatriots have been doing throughout Final Fantasy XIV story is tipping the balance way too much towards light. And so light is its own calamitous force if left unchecked.
Both sides.
Oh my God.
Please Star Wars.
Please no. Yeah, so I think they're building towards this idea of y'all been doing too much light stuff. You know what I mean? Light doesn't necessarily equal good. Light just equals light. So by banishing the forces of darkness, etc., you're kind of tipping the scales, and we may be looking at a supernova type. I don't know. Whatever.
Interesting that they went a sort of WoW way, where then there's a quote unquote good classes, quote unquote dark classes, and then there's kind of a war there to see how that lands and see if the dark can bring back the balance by playing into more the quote unquote evil stuff. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. We got some revelations about the nature of the Garlean Empire, who's been kind of the looming threat throughout Final Fantasy XIV in this last patch. So it'll be interesting to see how they play with that and how how they make this into more than just they bad, fight bad guy, because they've shown now that the Garlean Empire is not a monolith. There are people who are rebelling against a sort of fascist regime within it. So it's going to be interesting. I think Final Fantasy XIV still got a lot in store.
Definitely.
Yeah. Caitlin, the other game that you've been playing is also MMOE and features a lot of characters, although all of them under your control. Tell us about your experience with the Xenoblade 2 expansion, Torna of the Golden Country.
Okay, so Torna of the Golden Country it's I guess you would call it's the biggest piece of DLC that was shown to us as part of the expansion pass, although you can buy it separately. You don't have to have the expansion pass. You don't even have to have Xenoblade 2 in order to buy Torna if you want to. It's a prequel. It details the events of a pretty pivotal time that's referenced a lot in the main game through dialogue and flashbacks known as the Aegis War. And it involves some characters that you see in the main game, but just, it's 500 years before the events of the main game. And it is, It can be a fairly substantial piece of content. It took me 36 hours to beat the main story. I've seen people say they beat it in as little as 12, and I suppose that's doable. I am not the fastest player, so take my word with a grain of salt when I say 36 hours. My final
around 20.
Yeah, I mean, my final play time when I beat the main game was 170. So I'm clearly not the fastest player, but it's a nice, sizable chunk of Xenoblade content that I think doesn't overstay its welcome. It feels a lot like a mini bite of Xenoblade that gives you sort of all the things you would expect from a Xenoblade game without giving you lots and lots of busy work like the mercenaries or having to do the blade gacha from the main game.
Oh, that sounds heavenly.
Yeah, there's no blade gacha. You have a fixed part. So
I'm hearing that I'm going to need to beat the main game first. Otherwise, this is just going to spoil everything for me.
I think it depends on. I think it's going to be different for every person because it's a prequel. It takes place before the main story. You're not necessarily spoiling stuff that way, but you will learn things that happen during this time period about certain characters that get revealed via flashbacks in the main game. And because it's a smaller piece of content, they don't do as much world building or lore building. They don't spend as much time explaining the whole concept of blades and drivers. So will you miss things if you play this before the main game? Sure. I think the ideal setup is to play it after the main game. It probably will have a greater impact on you if you do.
Okay.
But they've tried to make it as accessible as they can for people who may want to play this first. You have tutorials up the wazoo explaining the gameplay, so you shouldn't worry that you're not going to know how to play this game. They explain it to you, and they make a lot of nice improvements to the gameplay. The battle system is faster, and I like what they've done with the vanguard and the rearguard system. So basically, in the main game, Xenoblade, you always played as the driver, and you could swap between 3 different blades, and you only ever semi-controlled the blades when they would do specials, and that just entailed basically just doing the button prompts where you have to hit the B button at the right time. And that was cool and fine, but it always felt kind of weird because blades are supposed to be these super powerful living weapons, and you never actually really play as them. You're always just playing as the driver. So in Torna, you play as both. And the idea is that every character in your party is either in a vanguard position, where they're the ones up front doing a lot of the attacking, or in the rearguard position, where they're doing more support skills. And every character has different arts depending on which position they're in. You can swap between those positions on any given, they call them teams. Each driver and blades combo form a team. So after a little bit of charge time, if you start off playing, say, as Laura, who's the main character of the expansion, you can then swap to Jin, her blade. And doing so, every character has a switch art that they perform when they switch, which is nice and flashy. And also every switch art has a piece of the blade the driver combo, which is the classic break, topple, and now launch and smash in Xenoblade 2. So there's a bit of a strategy in determining, okay, well, if I start off as this character and some other character breaks, then I can switch to my blade and the switch art will topple, and then someone else can launch and then switch to their blade and smash. So it gives you a little bit of additional strategy in terms of figuring out how to best pull off driver combos and blade combos. So that's fun. I think it makes everything feel a bit more action-packed, and it adds a little bit of strategy. Especially they sort of incentivize you to switch as much as possible by giving you what's called recoverable HP. So whenever you take damage, a portion of your HP bar will be red, and you can get that red portion back by switching switching the positions, basically. So you're encouraged to switch often between characters, not only to maintain your HP, but also to take advantage of arts and the driver combos and stuff like that. So I think it all, to my mind, I like it a lot better than the main game, even though the basic system is still the same. You still have 3 arts. You still try to pull off driver combos. You do the elemental specials to perform blade combos, and then the ultimate goal is to have enough elemental orbs around the enemy that you burst in a chain attack for massive damage. They also, I think, really good idea was that they changed how you get elemental orbs around enemies. In the main game, you had to do a 3-part blade combo to get a single orb around enemy. Now, as long as you're doing a special as part of a combo, each special in that combo generates an orb. So you can get like 3 potentially different elemental orbs after 1 blade combo instead of only 1. So it lets you build up elemental orbs a lot faster, which lets you do chain attacks a lot faster. It just makes the whole system work faster. And I think that for people that found the battle system in the main game to be slow because of enemies needing lots of HP so that you could perform all these combos and taking so much time to get the elemental orbs up to do chain attacks, it's all going to run a lot faster and I think feel a bit more fun as a result.
It sounds dreamy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, and there's lots of little things that they've done. I mean, the battle system is the big one, and I think for a lot of people that'll be a big one. Obviously, like I said, there's a fixed party. There's no, you don't resonate with cores anymore, so there's no gacha mechanics. There's no 0.001% chance of getting Cosmos or whatever her rate is, which is great both for a game mechanic and it doesn't waste your time making you, endlessly opened up, random cores hoping you get a special blade. It's also good for the story because everyone in your party is involved in cutscenes as opposed to the, necessary weirdness in the main game where only the main story blades show up in main story cutscenes. It was always kind of weird to have, like 2/3 of your party not show up in the main story because, of course, how could they have lines for every rare blade in main story content?
Right.
So that works better. As a result, field skills are a lot less annoying because you always, once you have the full party, you have everyone, all the field skills. You might need to level them up by, filling out the affinity nodes, but it's a lot, there's no shuffling and trying to like math. Okay, I need 5 ice blades on my party and I need light and I need this and that, it's none of that stupid crap. So
you can just focus on like whatever criteria you need to fulfill to raise their skill levels. So like fight 5 caterpillars or whatever, instead of having to switch out your party every 5 seconds.
Yeah. So it's great. And I mean, like, it doesn't fix absolutely everything. There's still stupid stuff like you have to go into the affinity menu for blades for their upgrades to actually apply. The game even has a tutorial telling you how to do this, and I still don't understand why. It makes no sense whatsoever. There's still, the having to go and kill X number of random enemy in order to get those affinity nodes. And there's still no bestiary. So there's, you had to kind of try and remember where you saw enemies and things like that. So it's not like it fixes everything, but I think it addresses enough of the big issues that people had with the gameplay in the main game. And there's just the fact that it's more focused because there's not as much to do. There's not, a gigantic amount of side quests. You don't have quests for all the blades. You don't have the mercenary system wasting your time. So it feels like a tighter focused game. And I mean, I don't know. I think it technically can be played before or after. I do think that it's probably best to play it after. There's some things that people who haven't played the main game might be a little confused about. But I don't know. I mean, it's on the other hand, it's like if you have no interest in Xenoblade 2, or if you tried to play Xenoblade 2 and you just really could not slog it out, I don't know that I want to say absolutely you shouldn't play this until after you play the main game. I don't want to, have someone feel like they should have to go through a 100-hour RPG that they don't like to play this expansion, this DLC that is in a fair amount of ways, I mean, kind of better. I thought to myself multiple times when I was playing through it, I kind of like this more than the main game. And I kind of wish I could explore the rest of All Rest with this crew. I don't super mind Rex. I don't super like him, but he doesn't annoy me. But I actually was thinking several times playing Torna, damn, yeah, I like these guys better. Sorry, Rex, you kind of suck. So,
yeah,
I
like at the very
dislike
least,
Rex.
at the very least, not having Tora in my party is a huge plus.
yeah.
I want to see what Xenoblade 2 has to offer. So I guess it's just going to be me and Tora for a little bit longer. But
you only have to deal with him until you get Morag in your party, and then you can just never use her ever again.
Yes, I can't wait. When I first saw her, Queen.
Yeah, she's great.
She's a better tank than Tora is anyway, so.
Nice.
Yep, she is. And you get to play Hugo, her ancestor, in Torna. So
Nice.
And he's perfectly nice. He doesn't get a lot of development, I think, but he's fine.
Yeah, there are a few characters that they needed more development. One of them, it's not necessarily Hugo. There's another character that I think was a huge wasted opportunity.
Who?
Minoth.
Oh yeah. Like,
It's cool seeing him, but he gets barely any screen time, and they waste several opportunities for him to, I don't know, interact with a certain character that's very important to him. So I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah. So this brings me to actually, I don't want to well, this is a podcast, right? So it's a discussion, and it may be one of disagreement. I agree with you. I think that Torna is basically like a more streamlined and arguably better experience than the core Xenoblade 2. I don't think it can really function independently of Xenoblade 2 altogether, just because you need sort of the background for the world, or why these people matter. I'm fine with the final battle and stuff of the game. I kind of feel like a lot of it is pointless. I think that I don't know. I felt like there were some missed opportunities. Minoth is one example of a character who didn't really get a lot of expansion. And going into it that this is set 500 years before Xenoblade 2. So things, it's not like every character is going to survive just because of time, right? And stuff, but other than Blades, who can live longer depending on if they become flesh eaters or whatever. But yeah, I just sort of felt like largely there was wasted potential for fleshing out these characters in interesting ways, or coming up with revelations that could influence how I felt about them sort of in the main game. I guess my main example is Laura, because Laura is, I guess, who's the main character, Jin or Laura?
I always kind of felt like Laura's the main character. I mean,
Yeah.
but both of them, you could make the argument that they're both kind of main characters.
Yeah, and I just feel like Torna didn't tell me anything about Laura I didn't already know, and Torna didn't change anything about Laura's involvement in the story. It's nice to see more of her, because she's literally fridged throughout Xenoblade 2. She's just suspended in cryostasis basically, and of her and you hear about her, but it was nice to have an opportunity to play as her. I just felt like her actions didn't matter that much. Jin is very important. Jin is hugely crucial to the Xenoblade 2 storyline. I think maybe I just had expectations that something unexpected would happen, and I felt like all of Torna was super predictable. I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I did not find anything surprising about any of the character moments. Yep, this is how Hugo's going to be. Yep, this is how Laura's going to be. I don't know. Maybe that's me being harsh on it, but
Well,
What's your take on that?
it's kind of, I mean, that's kind of what happens when you do a prequel DLC of like this, that's telling the story of a time period that gets discussed or shown to you a lot in the main game. It's kind of inevitable. I understand that.
I guess I was kind of hoping for like some interesting breadcrumbs to follow. Like, well, once you play, I'm making this up. Like, once you play Torna, you know that what's Adam's retainer's name? Milton. Like, Milton is Nia's granddad, and he actually becomes the blade that turns into Dromark, or like something like that. I would have found a little bit more interesting, and like maybe if they had hints to it even peppered throughout the main game, that way I could make a connection. But I didn't feel like there was that sort of connection happening anywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I think well, I think one of the questions is, I mean, so this was originally supposed to be part of the main game. It was originally supposed to be, I'm not sure if it was going to be quite in the form that we saw it. It might have been more truncated, but they originally wanted this content in the main game, and they had to cut it because they knew they weren't going to have enough time or money to finish it.
Oh, okay.
And Takahashi has said that that's what the idea is. So when they were approached about having, post game DLC, he was like, "Oh, I've got that. That's this." And so I don't know. Maybe it would have worked better as part of the main game. And I don't, when it got reshelved into this DLC, I don't know if they made any significant changes to story or characters or whatnot in order to facilitate it being that. And I don't know necessarily how the concept of it being a standalone release came out, and if they really designed it to function as that, or if that was more a Nintendo thing, wanting to have it, I don't know, for possibly extra sales or whatnot. If they did, if there was a significant part that was sort of designed with that idea in mind, then it's not an enviable position to straddle, to make content that has to potentially work for both existing players and new players. And that's straddling that line of, obviously we all wanted more detail about what happened during the Aegis War, even having played the main game, because they only show you tidbits. They don't show you the whole context. Adam wears a hood for all of the main game. He doesn't really get fleshed out beyond being Mithra's driver at the time. And that is one thing I think is really great about Torna, is it really fleshes him out through main story and through side content. He's a great guy.
Yes.
But where's the line between, we have to tell these story beats that people expect based on the flashbacks, and it has to work. It has to reveal enough about what happened to satisfy curiosity of what was the Aegis War. But do we really want to be dropping bombshells left and right that would only work for people who have played the main game in context, or do we want to? That's why I'm not quite sure, development wise, where the thinking was. Was it, at some point once it became DLC, did they make an effort specifically to have it work both ways, or was it really always intended? I mean, I think you could see it both ways. There's one thing in particular that they don't do in the ending that I think a lot of people expected them to do. I'm not going to say what it is to avoid spoilers.
I probably know exactly what you're talking about.
I think it actually works really effectively in a certain way, because everyone who plays the main game knows exactly what happens, and it's almost a little creepier and more disturbing that they don't show it, because they lead you into it so you know what happens, but they don't directly show it to you. And I know that there's possibly disappointment, because that's a huge pivotal moment that literally decides a certain character's actions in the main game. But thinking about it, I was thinking about it after finishing it, why wouldn't they have shown it? I think, didn't want to put all of the cards on the table and show you absolutely everything that happens. They still wanted there to be a few surprises in terms of why characters doing what they do, what is a certain character. There's like 2 specific things they don't show that I expected them to, and I have to feel like it was intentional to still have a little bit of mystery in the main game for people who maybe play Torna first. Because they show other, stuff that gets presented in flashbacks. There's a bunch. I mean, they pretty much show you almost every flashback cutscene happens in this game, with the exception of 2 really big ones. And they could have just shown all of it. And I have to think that, or have to wonder if it was intentional to, give you your answers, but not answer everything, so that you'd still have that surprise in the main game. And one of those things is literally, it's arguably the event that really kind of creates the conflict in Xenoblade 2. I think you could make the argument that had this event not happened, things would have went a lot differently in the main game. So I don't know.
Okay. I hear where you're coming from. I guess like what I'm trying to communicate is I probably didn't have the highest overall impression of the story after I finished it. Well, I'm softening way too much. I didn't have the best impression of the story after I beat it, because I did feel like they missed opportunities to capitalize on a couple of the story threads that I wanted like resolved or fleshed out or whatever. But I totally agree that Xenoblade 2 Torna is like a more streamlined, like the fat's trimmed out. I think it's a more fun game to play, and the speedier and sort of enhanced combat system, I think, is a big part of that. And it's not even that like the combat is drastically different. It's that they have the same core system and then they iterated on it and made it better. So yeah. I kind of wish we had access to that in the main game, but I understand it would be very difficult with the plethora of blades available to you.
Yeah.
The music we haven't really said anything about, but I think the music is fantastic.
Yes, it's really great. So there's a fair amount of reused music, which is what it is. But the new music is beautiful. There's a very kind of jazz kind of undertone to the main battle theme and area themes. There's a couple of battle themes that have been remixed. They're both Mitsuda battle themes, so I'm presuming that Mitsuda remixed them. And those are acoustic versions of the battle themes from the main game, so it's really nice. There's a beautiful new ending vocal theme by Jen Bird, composed by Mitsuda, and it's actually, I think it's my favorite Xenoblade theme. I like One Last You from the main game, but I really like this new ending theme, and it's a very beautiful, kind of haunting ending theme that plays during the final cutscene, and the lyrics in particular, I think, are really important. Once you know the context of what's happening in that scene, they're really impactful. So
that makes for 2 things I need to look up after this episode. I need to look up the new Omega music that I hadn't heard, and I want to look up this. I want to rewatch the ending. And listen to the lyrics, because I think I didn't pay that much attention to the lyrics when it was over. But
it's I'm pretty sure you can interpret it, and I think that's what it's intended to be, as a particular character singing to another. So yeah.
All right. Yeah, the music, I think, is one of the best aspects of it. I think the new main battle theme is better than the previous one, and I really want that soundtrack. I hope they've got to release it. Yes,
Gormat. I've gone on record. I did a review of the main game's music. I don't really like Gormat very much in the main game. I love Gormat, the Gormat remix in this. I wish I could have it in the main game because it's better.
It's good. It'd be nice if you could toggle it, kind of like you can toggle the battle themes for Elma and for Shulk and Fiora. So they should just do like a battle toggle DLC thing. Why not?
Yeah.
Oh, that actually reminds me. We will probably address a little bit of listener feedback later in the episode, but I did want to say thank you to Mitchell, who wrote into the show and talked to me a little bit about the Elma boss battle that they added via DLC. He gave me some strategies for beating Elma, because the second fight against her is very long, and if you don't like there's a thing where she summons clones, and you have to you can seal her from doing it, and so we had a nice little discussion about that. So thanks for writing in, Mitchell. I appreciate that, and I appreciate being able to have a party with Elma, Shulk, and Fiora in the main game. It's kind of fun, and you could have Cosmos and Telos. So you can have a whole bunch of Xeno folks. I wonder if they'll ever add anything from Xenogears. Probably not.
I mean,
a whole nostalgia throwback.
Because Square owns it, they have to
They're
negotiate a deal.
Tight, aren't they?
Yeah.
No Weltall
Is the
for us.
Chronicles X stuff in there too?
Elma.
Yeah, the main character.
Elma,
well,
gotcha.
whatever main character, quote unquote main character.
Oh, she's totally the main. I mean, we're not the main character. She is.
Yeah.
Tatsu's the main character. They're all friends.
No. Worst no pun. I mean, I'd hate it. Tora is not much better, but I still like Tora more than Tatsu.
Yeah, I think Torna's better, which is very sad. But okay, well, Xenoblade 2 Torna. It's you've heard our thoughts. I don't really know that I can condense that into one sentence, but
Do
conflicting.
you think any of this will bleed into like Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Like this will be like the new direction for gameplay to make it a little tighter and faster? Or?
I don't know. I mean, the battle
weird
system
because-
changed a lot, so
I mean, if they don't
Xenoblade 2
have the
feels a
same
lot slower
mechanics,
than its prequels.
it does.
yeah,
I think it's a lot slower.
yeah, it is. So, I mean, I think we all hope that there will be a Xenoblade 3, but I think the next, the next thing for Monolith Soft is going to be their new, like medieval, right? Era.
Oh, really?
Well, no, not. I don't know that it's going to be medieval. I think the concept art that we saw wasn't it? Or am I thinking
of the Atlas thing?
I'm thinking of Atlas. I'm sorry. No.
Right,
Okay.
the Project Re Fantasy by
Yeah.
Heshino.
That's what I was thinking just now too.
I didn't know if Monolith had anything on the cards at the moment. I imagine maybe we'll see some more of like their B team stuff before we see another big, impressive Monolith game. But there were
is it one of the Monolith devs was saying that he wanted to make
Button Kaitos.
right, but Bandai Namco has the rights, so
Yeah,
which is a shame. I don't
those
know.
two
if
games were
Bandai
really
Namco-
neat.
They were. I don't know if Bandai Namco's interested in pursuing that, so I hope they are. That'd be nice.
Maybe they could work together. Who knows?
Who knows? Weirder things have happened. We're getting like every character ever in Smash Brothers, so the collaborations never end. Well, I wanted to also talk about Caitlin. You have been playing the newest Assassin's Creed. I haven't played one of these in many years, so I am not at all in a position to judge how it is better or worse than any previous ones. But you're digging into Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which is like freshly out this week, right?
Yes, it's coming out this Friday, October 5th, and I have the honor to work on reviewing it for RPG Fan. I'm not gonna it's not gonna be done in time for a day one review, but I'm working on getting through it as fast as possible. I'm about 26 hours or so, I think, into it. But it is an odyssey of sorts. I think I'm probably only maybe about a third of the way through the main story. So I still have a lot to see. And what I have seen thus far, I like. I think there's a lot of interesting things that they've done to sort of it's not necessarily like it's hard changes. It's very much kind of an iteration on the Origins formula. So it's in that vein. The by and large, the very basic gameplay is going to feel very similar to Origins, but they've made lots of little improvements across multiple different systems. So I think right now where I am, of course, as immersed as I am in the game, maybe my opinion will settle a little bit, but I think right now I like it a lot more than Origins, and I enjoyed Origins a lot more than I thought I would. So it is, of course, set in ancient Greece, and you get to play as either Cassandra or Alexios, who is basically, they are a descendant of King Leonidas of Sparta, and they have an interesting artifact of his, the Spear of Leonidas, that lets them do things, and that's part of the main story of what I've seen thus far, has to do with that artifact and with who Cassandra. I'm just going to call her Cassandra because I'm playing as Cassandra. It's going to get a little old saying Cassandra or Alexios.
Right, yeah.
But who she is, who they are. And I have to say, what my biggest criticism about Origins was that I thought the story just didn't work really well. It wasn't presented in the best way. It wasn't paced in the best way. And it felt like it was just a hit list. You go through the game, just basically, I have to kill this person, I have to kill that person. Thus far, I think the story in Odyssey is much improved. It's a personal story centering around your character, who they are, their family, that kind of thing. It's drawn me in more than Bayek's story did in Origins. I'm getting to that. There's been some revelations that I'm like pretty heavy stuff. So it has the potential, I think, to be ultimately a more personal and more epic story than Origins. But of course, I'm only about, again, a third of the way through. So the jury will be out for me until I finish that and see how everything comes together. I think Cassandra in particular, and that's who I picked to start off with, because of course you give me a girl as a choice, I'm going to pick the girl. I think she in particular is excellent. I love her. I love her actor. She does a great job with her voice and her physical presence and emotions and whatnot. I will try to go back, and I'm not going to be able to do 2 full playthroughs, but I will try to go back and play as Alexios too to see how he kind of goes through. I know that they did the voice acting and the mocap, their own kind of style, so it's not like it's going to be the same presentation. It will probably feel a little bit differently going as each character. But
Greg, you weren't mocapped for the main character in this game too?
No, I was not. Just a friend of mine named Michael Antonakos. He plays Alexios.
Oh, you weren't joking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was not. No, he went to university with my fiance.
Ooh.
We'll get another reason to pick it up, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to check it out.
So, I mean, so that's the story and the characters. The biggest sort of changes as far as like from an RPG perspective are, of course, the dialogue system that they added into the game. So every cutscene, every conversation you're in, you will have dialogue options. It's kind of what I expected thus far. It's not quite as, say, involved as like, say, the earlier Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2, where you basically have a dialogue wheel for everything you say, that your characters will say things on their own before you have any input. And so to a certain extent, there's a bit of an established character there that you get to watch, and then you can then make choices based on your preferences. So it's kind of
you decide pivotal moments kind of thing?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, you will have dialogue choices in every cutscene. It's not that you really go through anything without having an input, but there's a fair amount of dialogue that happens without your input. And I think, that does, I think, ultimately work for the game. I mean, it would have been a lot of work to have every single line. I mean, as much as I like the style of Mass Effect 1 and 2, where pretty much you were in control of every single thing Shepard says, that's a lot of work. And for a game this big, with the story being so sort of, at times anyway, being sort of hyper focused on your character, I can see why they didn't do that. And also, I mean, this is their first stab at it. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see the next game, assuming that they continue to keep it an action RPG, if they make changes. So alongside having dialogue choices, a big theme that Ubisoft has sort of put out there is about choice, and that this is a game where you make choices that can impact your story. And I have seen thus far the impacts of some of my decisions come back. One of them, I apparently made a bad decision.
Uh-oh.
I let some sick people they were going to be killed by soldiers because they had plague, and I let them go, and I killed the soldiers because they wouldn't let them go. And then I came back and I heard that apparently the plague spread. Of course it did.
I love it.
So, I mean, this is something I'll look at really closely because I should be able to. It's an early story choice, so I'll make the opposite choice and see how that changes things. But it certainly seems like my choice there had an impact. And there are other things, like, with main story quests. You can decide if you kill a character or whatnot, and if you kill them, that could have at least I believe it could have repercussions later on. So again, like with the whole breadth of the main story, the jury will be out until I get through all of it to see really how much my choices affect things. But certainly more than every other Assassin's Creed game where you didn't have any choices and it was just static cutscenes. I think this will, that's what you're looking for, this will scratch that itch in a way. Alongside that, they've done other things. You now can upgrade all of your equipment instead of just your weapons. Origins, you could only change your weapons. You could glamour basically different outfits, but you didn't actually change different pieces of your armor, and you can do that here. They all have stats. There's some choices to be made with regards to equipment because on top of improving your damage or your defense, all equipment can also do things like improve your assassin damage. So anything that you do when you try to assassinate an enemy, or when you use bow skills, you can change that. So you sometimes have to shuffle between different gear pieces depending on what bonuses they give you. It's kind of, it's stats, and it is what it is. It's I haven't really necessarily found super cool, super amazing, unique stuff, but I assume that kind of stuff exists because there were some like legendary gear pieces in Origins that were like, your swords are on flame or something like that. So
you gotta have swords on fire. Come on.
Yeah. You actually have a skill now where you can, for a time, set your swords on fire or add a poison thing to your swords to poison your enemies and stuff like that.
Wow.
So
That's cool.
That's a lot more RPG than like what I've experienced because I haven't played one since 2, so I'm used to just like stab the guy, not like full RPG combat.
Yeah. And I mean, like, it's a big game, so there's lots of things I could talk about, but I don't want to go on and on and on. There are things like bases, like forts and whatnot that return from the main game, where you have to like you have objectives once you reach an enemy controlled area to like kill the commander and loot this stuff. They added an extra element because this is set during the Peloponnesian War in ancient Greece, where Athens and Sparta are at war with each other. So every region is controlled by one city or the other, and your actions can weaken the hold that one city has on it. Usually what you're doing is weakening the hold. And then eventually, once a region gets weak enough, you can engage in a conquest battle. This is that gigantic battlefield full of gobs and gobs of people whacking each other with swords, and you can wade through the fray and attack people. And basically your goal is, depending on who you're fighting for, is to just kill enough people, captains, regular mooks, whatnot, to win the day. And then when you do, whatever side you're fighting for, presuming that you are successful in the battle, will take control and whatnot. So it's kind of it's an added mechanic, and thing to do. I don't yet know if it has any impact on story or the endings. It just seems to be an extra thing to do. But it's kind of cool. There are gigantic battles, and you can fight for one side and fortify that area for them, and then you can turn right around and undermine them and do it all again and fight for the opposing side. So you could. There's some potential hijinks there where, like, I helped Sparta win this area, then I'm going to turn around and help Athens win it back for reasons.
That.
So
interesting.
and
that allows you
Yeah. I don't know again if it has any greater impact or if it's just because the backset of this time period is there's a war going on between Athens and Sparta. So um, the world is it's really pretty. I like it. I've set in ancient Greece, so what you might expect, but it's a beautiful presentation. There's so far, I feel like it's much more colorful, and I'm liking the variety in locales more than Origins, which was a lot of desert and a lot of yellow and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be very rooted in the historical like landmarks and geographical kind of alignment of everything too, right?
Yeah. The map it's from what I can tell, it's pretty much the entire map of the entire, for most part of Greece and the Aegean Sea and a bunch of islands in the Aegean Sea, including big ones like Crete is there, and stuff like that. I'm a little bit sad that Corfu is not included. That's the island that my grandfather grew up on. So sad, although maybe we know there's going to be DLC. The season pass has already been detailed as to what it contains. Origins added with its major DLC content, it added 2 new whole areas that are connected to but separate from the main play space in the main game. So maybe we'll go to Corfu as part of DLC. I'm not like really holding out hope because it's just. It's just an island off the coast of Greece. So, I mean, like, I don't know why, but,
But it's relevant to you.
It's relevant to me because it's where my family's from. And I've never been to Greece. So I'm kind of living vicariously, experiencing, obviously, ancient Greece. It's not what it looks like now, per se. But
you're not going to stumble across a descendant an ancestor of the Argyros clan while you're
maybe.
out
I don't know.
assassinating.
So far, nobody has last names. So, outside of, historical figures. So
any one of them could be.
Any one of them could be my ancestor. Yeah.
And then any one of them probably is. You probably are descended from Leonidas or something like that.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's kind of nice playing as Cassandra. Not that she's a dead ringer for me, but she is a Greek lady with the brown eyes and the brown hair. And I mean, to that extent, it's kind of cool.
Because you can see something of this is like we're talking about Timespinner. You can see something of yourself in a character that you're playing, and it feels nice.
Yeah, so it's cool. And the only other thing I guess I'll mention is that naval travel and combat is back in Odyssey. They took a break in the games after Black Flag, but it's a major component of Odyssey. And I mean, I can clearly see how they've kind of kept it, the basics of it anyway, from Black Flag, and it was used sparingly in like minor things in Origins that you didn't really have a whole lot of control over. So it functions a lot the same, but they've done things like you can recruit lieutenants to serve on your ship, and they all have different bonuses that they can give to, like, they might improve your arrow damage, or they might let you defend more from incoming damage. You can recruit pretty much anybody in the world. If you knock them out, you can. It's kind of silly in that all you do is you knock them out and then you pick them up and they run to your ship automatically. Like they could have been trying to kill you a second ago, and yeah.
Sounds a little Metal Gear 5.
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Bolting them up into the sky.
You're told that your first mate, basically you get them to your ship and your first mate will talk them into it. So there's that. But I mean, like, it's kind of silly. But potentially you could recruit anybody, I think, outside of, I'm sure, some main story characters that you can't touch that way, to serve on your ship. And you can use resources to upgrade things like the hull, or the power of your arrows, or how often you can fire. So there's some upgrade potential there. And so far it's been cool. I've yet to see whether or not it's going to annoy me as much as ultimately Black Flag's ship traveling in combat did. I think what I mentioned before so far has held up because Black Flag was basically just an ocean with a bunch of small islands. It felt a lot more tedious to travel around, but you have this huge mainland in Greece to explore, and as well as the Aegean Sea. So I think that it's going to be, it might hit that sweet spot of, hey, cool ship combat without feeling like, oh, I had to travel on my ship to this island and probably deal with a bunch of random pirates along the way that will kill me. Kill me now, kind of thing. So.
Well, I look forward to hearing your full and nuanced take. Not that this wasn't nuanced, but your full review when that comes up on the site.
Yep. Yeah. It'll be as soon as I can make it, and yeah.
Sweet. I look forward to it. Well, who wants to talk about smartphone games, you guys? You know how much I love those, right? It's not like I've gone on record several times talking about how much I can't stand gacha games and how I usually don't play games on my phone. Well, let me talk to you about... Yeah, they did. I wanted to tell you about a little something that has caused me to rethink all of my choices throughout my entire life. And how
oh, wow.
No, not really. So Nintendo just released their big collaborative smartphone game with Cygames, who is known for... God, aren't they doing like the action, like Grand Blue Fantasy game? Am I thinking of somebody else?
Platinum, yeah.
Well, then, what the hell has Cygames done? I'm typing it in right now. Cygames has done...
I think Cygames is doing one as well.
Cygames just did Grand Blue Fantasy then.
Oh, okay.
So Nintendo is doing this collaboration with them to, presumably make a lot of money. And to that end, they have released Dragalia Lost. It is their first original IP smartphone game. Up to this point, Nintendo has released Super Mario Run, Fire Emblem Heroes, and Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, which are all just mobile versions of their existing IPs. So now we have Dragalia Lost. And it is a gacha-ass gacha game. It's like one of those you play as... it's very like traditional fantasy, pretty tropey. Like you play as this prince that's he's like the seventh in line heir to a medieval-ish kingdom. And he has to forge pacts with the elemental dragons across the land to like save the world from being thrown out of balance elementally or whatever. So, gosh, I don't even know where to begin with this. So it's set up in a mobile game, a gacha game format wherein like you can summon rare characters, which are like a slot machine, random polls for characters who may or may not be more powerful depending on how rare they are. And you have daily quests to check in on, and missions are structured such that it's like you do one level and it costs stamina to do, and you recharge stamina in real time. So it's all of the trappings of, your regular gacha game, which I have repeatedly railed on in the past. And I'm acknowledging that now because for some reason, I'm drawn into this game right now. And I don't think that it does anything like remarkable in terms of its mission structure or whatever that's better than any of these other gacha games. But something about it, like I've been playing it for 2 days and I don't hate it. What I do hate is myself for playing it. But no, it's Dragalia Lost is more like it's an action RPG. So it's not just like it can be mindless. Don't get me wrong, but it's instead of being like a turn-based battle format where you just put it on auto and leave it alone. You have these little levels where you move around. The control is actually pretty intuitive for a touchscreen. You just you slide your finger depending on where you want to move, and you tap to attack. You have a party of 4 characters, and characters are aspected to elements, and everybody has like super moves that you can unleash. And the main gimmick, besides being an action RPG, is you can transform into a dragon, since that's the crux of the story, is the main character making pacts with dragons. So you have like a, super mode you unleash where you transform into a giant dragon and just kind of rampage. It feels really good to fight enemies. They've really nailed the whole like, I feel strong and I get to wipe out a horde of enemies kind of thing. But what's drawn me to the game, and what's not like immediately made me hate it. And who knows, I might stick with this game for a week and then drop it like I do with every other gacha game. But it'll just last a week longer than the rest. It's like just so well polished, and I know polish is a very nebulous thing to quantify, but it's got such ridiculously good production values. Like, the budget for this game must be insane. It is very bright and colorful. It has like very appealing art that doesn't delve into being like weird or fetishy or creepy or whatever. It's just like very eye-pleasing. It's got nice 3D models for the characters that are expressive and well animated. It looks like just kind of it could be like a nice PS3 or PS Vita game with the quality of the character models. It's like not fully. It's voice acted in English, and certain event scenes are fully voiced. It's good voice acting too. The localization is actually really good. Like, it's still a pretty rote story, but the moment-to-moment writing is quite... it's sharp. It's got a lot of character to it. Like, instead of somebody saying, "Oh no, we better flee the village before the monsters attack," somebody might say, and it's not too much, but somebody might say something like, "I can't even think of anything. We better get out of here before they fry our bacon," and shit, I can't think of anything clever.
It's just more personality.
There is more personality, yeah. And listen to me. I am a localization editor, and I can't think of anything to say. I just find that the writing is like kind of fun and not just totally throwaway, because pretty much every gacha game I played up to this point, with the exception of maybe Dissidia, Opera Omnia, Final Fantasy, has had, like, I don't care about any of the dialogue in those games between missions that I've played, because it's all just like superfluous nonsense to get you to the next point. And I'm not saying that Dragalia Lost doesn't have that, but it's well localized enough or like entertainingly written enough that I don't mind reading it. So besides being very polished, like, the soundtrack is weirdly amazing. It's heavy J-pop. There's a J-pop opening theme on the title screen, and there's like several J-pop melodies. One that plays in your main menu. There's a J-pop boss theme, and I get kind of shades of like Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm weirdly smitten with the soundtrack, and I was playing it the other day, and I was at a friend's house, and we were just like sitting there all kind of like doing our own thing, and I was playing that, and one of them was like, "What is that?" And then we ended up all kind of like gathering around and talking about it, and my boyfriend was like, "Why is the music for that game so good? Like, isn't that just one of those phone games?" It's not that it's revolutionary in any way. And again, I may end up dropping it before too long, but it's just weirdly, it's well done. Like, if you're gonna play a gacha game, I feel like this is the one. Like, it's kind of the best realization of that format I've seen so far. And don't get me wrong, it's got all of the exploitative kind of practices that I have spoken out against in the past, and I'm not like taking that back, because I still don't like the idea of, you got to pay real money if you want to get ahead once you hit a certain wall or whatever. But for the time being, I haven't hit that wall. I'm finding it to be a really cute distraction, and I like the soundtrack a lot, and will, like, at the very least buy that when it comes out. But if you were like me and you're super anti-gacha game in general, like, maybe this will melt your cold heart like it melted mine a little bit. At the very least, it's free.
Oh no! Don't,
it's free.
Don't
I
make a
just tried
Devil
to
May Cry
download it.
reference. Don't do it.
Not out in the UK yet.
Oh, is
So-
it not?
No, so I'm safe.
Okay, you're safe for the time being. It is a gacha game. It is not going to change your mind if you hate gacha games, probably, unless it somehow gets through like it did to me. I don't know what's going on. I don't know who I am. I don't recognize myself, and I want to move on to the next section of the podcast. Greg, you
That's fair.
solicited some questions, I guess, on our Discord, did you not? From our
I sure did. Reached out to RPG fans. And because, back when you kind of restarted things with the podcast post Rob, we were trying to reach back out to the audience, and we were asking questions or taking up like Twitter questions and stuff. And I kind of wanted to get back to that because we just haven't had time to make time for that as much. So, yeah, we did get a few questions, some that we'll cover, some not so much. First, though, I did want to give a shout out to Moose on Discord, who says they haven't been listening to the podcast for the past couple months, but they're coming back to listen to probably Retro and ourselves now that their mother's feeling better. So I just wanted to say, I'm glad your mom's feeling better, Moose. We're happy to have you back as a listener.
Yeah.
Big time.
That being said, Cyanide had a few questions for us, but the one that stood out for me was, what is your favorite recent JRPG soundtrack? And I wanted to go around the proverbial room and ask folks to pick out their fave, although I feel like, given some of today's discussion, we might already have that, but well, let's hear what you got to say. Caitlin, let's go with you first.
Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 2. Any answer besides Xenoblade 2 is wrong.
Ooh, them's fighting.
Xenoblade 2 over Torna?
Well, I kind of mean both, but...
Okay, so that Torna is in that blanket.
They both qualify because the soundtrack officially from the main game released this year, and then Torna came out, so...
Legit. Yeah. Jury allows. Derek, how about yourself?
See, this is tough because if we're talking this year, not everything this year that I want to hear has released yet, and that includes Legend of Heroes Sen no Kiseki 4, or Trails of Cold Steel 4, which just released in Japan like yesterday or something.
I need to listen to it.
So first of all, I need to mute that hashtag on Twitter so I don't get any spoilers. Second of all, the soundtrack should be releasing, I don't know, probably like soon, I hope. Falcom is usually really good about releasing their soundtracks through iTunes, like abroad. So I will have to keep an eye on that. And that may well make my soundtrack of the year based on their track record. But that's not fair because it's not out yet. So just to sort of give a predictable answer, I would say Octopath Traveler has been incredible so far. Some of the best boss and character themes I think I've heard in a long time. And the Stormblood soundtrack for Final Fantasy XIV officially came out this summer, and I think that's just full of amazing stuff. And then most recently, I really like Dragalia Lost's music. So.
Nice. Is the Burn stuff on that soundtrack release as well?
It's not.
No, Stormblood soundtrack included everything, I think, up through 4.3. So it ends with Tsukiyomi's battle music, which is awesome. And I love it. And I'm super happy that it was on there. But we'll definitely get another soundtrack release, probably before expansion next year, that will include the music from this patch. And we could almost have 2 more patches. There's enough time for 2 more patches. So maybe 1 or 2 more patches. So.
And Rab, what you got for us?
I mean, this year has been chock full, but in terms of JRPG soundtracks, there's not like a whole lot that hasn't been mentioned.
Well, what else have you played? I'll branch it out a bit.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
I find the Monster Hunter World soundtrack pretty enjoyable. It's quite pleasant to listen to when you're playing that game. The last soundtrack that I really, really, really liked was Heaven Will Be Mine, which the visual novel from Worst Girls Games that I reviewed earlier this month. Very sort of industrial synth poppy, kind of experimental, but still has a poppy edge. But I also wanted to mention a JRPG with a very good soundtrack that's probably going to get overlooked this year, and that's Alliance Alive.
Oh, that does have an amazing soundtrack.
Yeah, for a not very amazing game.
Yeah, the game's alright. I forget when it came out this year because I don't know, it seemed like forever ago, but it was only maybe March.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, soundtrack, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I think
a long time ago.
That may have been the first episode of Random Encounter where I took over as the primary host and started adding music because I know that I used music from that game on the episode. So
that sounds about right, actually.
Yeah, it's super good. I love all of the world themes in that, like the rain world and the caged world and such. The battle themes are good too.
Good choice. Yeah, that is good. I'm also going to echo Derek that I think Octopath Traveler just has a fantastic soundtrack as well, and just harkens back to a lot of what I love about games of yore, and also has got some new stuff that really gets the blood flowing. Mm-hmm. But thanks for that question.
Like classic Square.
Yeah, exactly. It's just tapping into what the entire game seems to be about, is that classic Square vibe. But thanks for that question, Cyanide. Mayo also asked us what our favorite episode of Random Encounter. I'm just going to quickly answer it since everyone is very busy. making podcasts, not having time to listen to them as much. But I was catching up finally. So to give that shout out to Solosi, I really was loving the top 10 SNES RPGs, the real one. And I do agree with most of that list. But what I really liked about it was just discovering some games that I never have thought to play before. Like Dragon Quest V sounds really, really interesting, and I really want to play it now, for example.
Oh,
so,
and you were saying best episode of our favorite episode of Retro Encounter, right?
I was, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, did I say random by accident? I meant retro.
We got it. You said slow, so I figured.
Derek and Caitlin, I really loved the Falcom retrospective that the three of us were on alongside Mike Solosi back in 2016. That was a lot of fun.
I was gonna say, I forget when we did that. It was some time ago.
I think like almost exactly 2 years ago.
Oh, geez.
You seem like the right people to talk about it, though.
I mean, we do like our Falcom.
Sure do.
And I believe as a listener myself, before coming on to RPG Fan, I did actually listen to that one, and there's a lot of stuff from Falcom. And then, like Derek, you've been talking to me about it, and Solosi bought me Memories of Salsetta, I think, and I haven't had a chance to play it, but there's a lot of stuff from listening to the podcast that have told me I should play some of these finally.
Yeah.
And that was one of those podcasts that turned me out of that.
They're pretty universally good games. If nothing else, they all have great music.
And really rocking music.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So much good music.
I could go on and on about Falcom soundtracks, which is why I cheated and pulled a shulk and looked to the future for my favorite soundtrack of the year, because it might very well be. Who knows?
Topical.
Okay, that's three things they need to look up after this episode is over. Music-wise.
Get on it, Derek. You got work to do. But yeah, thank you everyone for your questions. Please hit us with more, whether it's about recent reviews we've done. If there's more interesting details you want to know, like how to get that thing out of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Caitlin will be like, well, I did it, and let me tell you. So stuff like that, we're happy to know. Or just random questions of what's our favorite RPG weapon, whatever. All that sort of stuff is really just neat to kind of engage you folks and make you feel like you matter, because we can't do this without you. I mean, we could, but it would just be shouting into a void, which who wants that?
I mean, it's a coping mechanism.
You mean there's stuff outside of Random Encounter? Like,
People.
Wow.
Yeah, it's hard.
Holy crap, my mind is blown.
Love to podcast in a vacuum.
A lot of things are happening in vacuums, apparently, this year. Well, moving on from reader questions, thank you for bringing those to our attention, Greg. We also just wanted to touch on two pretty big news stories, neither of which are very cheery. But first is we heard about Telltale Games having a very sudden, from what we can tell, studio closure that led to the layoffs of 250 people. Is that right?
I think 275.
Oof.
It's incredibly shocking either way.
One of which had just been hired the week before and moved cross country, and another person who now has quickly found their work visa canceled and now has to leave the country on short notice.
Jeez,
that's rough.
So I'm going to try not to curse, but I mean, there's no way that the management didn't know that was happening.
Yeah.
I'm pretty furious about this news, although I don't know anybody at Telltale, but this is the most egregious example that I can think of that shows why the games industry needs unions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, between this and the whole Kurt Schilling fiasco way back when.
Big time.
With, Kingdoms of Amalur, or
which relevant to news. THQ Nordic has that now, so maybe we'll get exciting things from that. But anyways, back to this. Yeah, it was very big mismanagement, and again, it's one of those things where it's like they had to have seen this coming. They could have warned people a little better, but maybe they've just been denied.
They're under
no severance.
They're facing a class action lawsuit now, specifically because they violated labor laws in the way that they let people go.
Yeah, the worker adjustment retraining notification of 88 says you need to give 60 days notice in California in particular, where Telltale is based.
Weird.
That is, this would be, I know that America is very different from the UK, but this would be, boy, some people would be going to prison if this kind of thing happened in the UK.
Well, it just makes us wonder too, again, how how have things been run up until now then? Because it always seemed like it's been a company that's been functioning completely normally on a decent model that has been sustainable, but then all of a sudden this turnaround and this egregious mismanagement, it's just like, has this been going along the whole time? Has it been just a terrible company to work for?
Well, now that staff aren't beholden to NDAs, and in fact that they are suing the company in a class action suit, reports have come out from multiple ex-Telltale people that painted a portrait of an unsustainable work environment where 70-hour weeks were the norm, and then there was crunch periods on top of that with unpaid overtime, and everybody has pretty much said this place was a nightmare to work, and this is not what this industry should be.
Jesus. And that goes to show also that relative or like general critical success does not in any way mean like a well-functioning company or even financial success, because apparently they either didn't have the money to pay their employees or they grossly mismanaged the money that they had, which led to this situation happening. Because I mean like how can they have like announced the final season of The Walking Dead and then in the middle of it be like, "Oh, sorry, we're canceling it and shuttering the company," which by the way,
staff immediately before.
Yeah, exactly. And then like the subsequent response of like, "Well, we're reaching out to people to complete the story anyway." F that. Like, what about your employees?
So nasty.
Because all that is like seeking to continue to profit from this intellectual property while paying none of that back to the people that they just absolutely gutted with studio closures. So,
and on top of that, like I feel like I was just reading some really like vitriolic responses from people to it, that some people just thought employees should stay on and work for free to help finish product.
That
That's
take
how that
was
works, right?
the hottest of hot takes.
oh my god.
And I mean, like, what their argument was that modders do it for free, so clearly professionals should be able to do. Completely missing the point
Everybody
of how
should get paid.
modders have jobs, so that's how they're able to do it. So,
And a lot of them, it's just a passion thing. Like there's some people do stuff for passion, some people don't, and there's nothing you can fault people for who do want to do things to make a living at and can't afford to do it as a passion. I'm sure everyone's very passionate about their jobs and the project they were working on, but at the end of the day, they got to pay rent.
They got to eat. They got to have healthcare.
Exactly.
I'm worried someone's probably had a hot take already, but I worry that some people might actually, like the shittiest of gamers, might be pissed about the class action lawsuit because they're afraid that maybe it means that Telltale's tentative promise to try and finish.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Someone's had that.
I guarantee you're correct.
Yeah.
Because
sure.
Don't take away my games.
Yeah. Well, I was having this conversation a little while back with a friend about like just general unsustainable working conditions in the game industry, or like unhealthy work habits, or we were just talking about how Soken, the composer for Final Fantasy XIV, is always talking about how burned out he is, and it's like that makes me worry for him. We've heard about how Masahiro Sakurai, the sort of creator of the Super Smash Bros. Franchise, like overworked himself into severe illness.
That poor guy.
What was that, Brawl, or was that 4? I don't remember.
Brawl, I believe, and then I think again with 4. And did his family leave him?
I don't know. That
but he worked way too hard.
Right.
And the question is that put on himself or is that from the higher ups?
Well, I think it's just expectations. Like he's working because he knows there are people out there who want the results of his labor, and I think that like ethically, that's not okay. If I heard that if Masahiro Sakurai was going to die tomorrow if he didn't cancel Smash Brothers, I'd be like, cancel it right now.
Yeah.
Somebody's well-being is not worth like my interest in a video game, and I want Smash super bad, so bad. But like, I mean, I can honestly say that, and I'm not just trying to put on this front of like I'm so noble, but truly, if I heard that there was a way that I could like make his life, I could save his life or something by them canceling the game, I'd be like, cancel it. Because I mean, this is what it's coming down to, is when people are complaining about things like, ugh, Telltale's not going to finish my Walking Dead, I'm really upset about it. I mean, you have to consider that there are like real people who are making the game, and those people are no longer being taken care of and they can't just they won't do it for free. They shouldn't do it for free, period. And to
Absolutely
expect
not.
that is ludicrous and entitled.
That's absolute entitlement. That's all there is to it. The bottom line is people
Yeah.
feel so entitled.
Yeah, so I mean, it's artists creating art, but like artists are also people who need to be able to sustain themselves. And we
Yeah.
say this as we are all artists in our own way, like, you know, writers, or Greg's an actor. And it's like, if we didn't get paid, I mean, again, this is an example of what we do for RPG Fan as a passion project, but the only reason why we can do it is because we have other ways of sustaining ourselves.
Well,
So,
exactly. It doesn't mean every journalist should do this for free.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I
we were getting
write. I'm a freelance writer. I'm an editor. Like, I have to get paid for my work somewhere. And just because I like what I do generally and I'm passionate about it doesn't mean that I'm willing to work for free for no reason.
No, an RPG Fan doesn't put ridiculous demands on us. They understand that our time is willingly given just for the heck of it, right? It's just for the passion of keeping a great site going. They don't get on our case overly about, oh, well, you know, we come before your life, so
Right.
you know,
Well, and
don't eat,
to-
sleep, and breathe, or see your family. Play this game, please.
Yeah. And to sort of loop it back into the discussion of developer health, or artist health,
Yes.
we heard recently about Nobuo Uematsu basically going on indefinite hiatus, talking about how his health has deteriorated. And I don't know that he was necessarily actively working on like a big project, but he does have his band, the Earthbound Papas, and he's like a constant contributor to a lot of Square Enix projects. So because of
Small
his
studios, right?
yeah, he has his band, and doesn't he have his own studio as well?
I feel like it was called Smile, but I could be wrong. Anyways, yeah, he branched out
Yeah.
of Square Enix itself and made his own thing, and thus could
Right.
freelance to what he wanted.
So because of his ailing health, he's decided to sort of step away from his creative work for the time being and go on hiatus. And he has said that he fully intends to return once his health is better, but like the reality is that he may not get to a point where he wants to be working as hard as he was before. We certainly hope that isn't the case. Like, I hope he's able to get healthy, and we wish him the absolute best. I think I speak for everybody at RPG Fan when we say that not only has his work been hugely influential in like the games that we've enjoyed playing, like it's been relevant to us developing into the type of people who want to come here and critique and talk about RPGs and their music and such. So
Yeah.
I
certainly hope he
definitely-
recovers.
I definitely hope he regains his health, but I mean, even if that means, you know, living out a healthy retirement, that's absolutely fine.
Yes.
He has put in a body of work of like a lifetime achievement that few have. And I mean,
Yeah.
even if he's a person.
Yeah.
So I say that again.
So like he has done like a lifetime, his body of work is like a lifetime achievement. And I mean, even if that wasn't the case, even if he didn't do as many projects as he did, he's still a person, and you know, whatever he decides to do at this point in his life is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
and up to him, you know.
Yeah.
Just because he's got a lot of adoring fans doesn't mean that he should be like expected to overwork himself into illness, which is what Sakurai did, and you know what some people apparently want Telltale's ex-employees to do. So yeah, I mean, it's important that everybody be able to sustain themselves. So hope the best for Uematsu's health. I would love to hear more of his music if he composes more in the future, but you know, Final Fantasy is in very capable hands with a lot of these other composers. Soken, Masashi Hamauzu, what's the Hitoshi Sakimoto. Like, we've got very, very able people at the helm who are bringing new and diverse sounds to Final Fantasy. So it's not like Final Fantasy won't go on without him. It's just, it's important to remember that he's a person and his legacy is very important, but so is his health. So
Agreed.
yeah, so we wish him the best. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Random Encounter. So if you enjoyed the show and you have questions, comments, or spare potions, please email us, podcast@rpgfan.com. Funny enough, I actually got an email mere minutes before we recorded today's episode from Arcturus, who drew me a potion, like an actual drawing of a potion.
Oh, amazing.
Oh,
Picture of and sent it in.
We can
So
post that somewhere.
we should. Maybe I'll try to like upload it into the body of the news post or something. It's very cute.
Heck yeah.
Or throw it on your
So
Twitter.
thanks for the actual potion, Arcturus. very much obliged.
We
So-
actually
If you-
listened.
Yeah, we did. We asked for it, and he didn't hoard all of the potions for himself for the final boss and then never use them like I do. So
It's a real problem.
it is a real problem. So in addition to emailing us at podcast@rpgfan.com, you can also follow us on Twitter @rpgfancom, and you can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/rpgfancom. Please subscribe to us on iTunes or through the RSS feed. We did get one new review on iTunes since I started badgering however many months ago. Thank you very much. It was a 5-star review, and we appreciate it very much. So we appreciate you all tuning in. For me, Caitlin, Greg, and Robert Fenner, thanks for listening, and we'll see you all later. You get your full name, Robert. Robert Fenner. Robert Bibby Bennett Fennerino.
We need some way.
And we love you.